Hello. Today is Saturday, February 10th, 2024. This is day 127. My name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. I'm the Executive Director of Churches for Middle East Peace. This is the 127th day since October 7th. I've been doing these videos daily since the horrors of the Hamas attacks on the south of Israel. I'm seeking to tell stories of Palestinians, of Israelis. Our primary goal is to end violence, to seek a just and lasting peace for all people of the Holy Land, to speak out against hatred, against the destruction and killing towards any people. Right now, the main goal is to bring an end to the bombing and the incursion in Gaza, which, the International Court of Justice said could be a genocide. So I thought today I would actually talk about what is life like in Gaza. Since October 7th, I've been telling stories about Palestinians and Israelis as we call for a ceasefire. We've been working for violence, against violence. We've been working for the incursion in Gaza to end. We've been calling for a release of the hostages in exchange for prisoners. I've been seeking to provide, facts and statistics based on the news from OSHA, the Office of Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. But as we talk about the number of those killed in Gaza being at 27,000 people, approaching almost 30,000 people, and as we talk about the number of injured being, 60,000 people, or roughly that number, as only now about 100 hostages remain alive in Gaza, as the death toll in Israel is about 1,400 people. What are we talking about in terms of what life is like? And so I wanted to try to humanize a little bit of what I've been reading and learning and hearing directly about things in Gaza. One of the main concerns in Gaza right now is hunger and starvation. And I would just say this not only affects, the more than 2 million people living in Gaza, it also affects the hostages. Those who have been released from hostage thus far have described the conditions and have said that they were hungry. And those that have released, were not there for 127 days. So hunger and starvation is a main issue. We're at the phase where news is reporting that every single person in Gaza is now hungry. Charities, Palestinians report the food situation is dire. Children are going without food for days. Some people are resorting literally to grinding the feed that is used for animals into flour to survive. People are cooking bread with animal feed that's made for animals, which causes digestive problems. It has a horrific taste. Often people have described digging in the soil to access water pipes to be able to find it for drinking and washing. International charity Action Aid has said that food has become so scarce that people in Gaza are resorting to eating grass. Every single person in Gaza is now hungry, and people have just 1.5 to 2 liters of unsafe water per day to meet all of their needs. And that has been intensified because attacks are approaching Rafah, the southernmost city in Gaza. And that, of course, we've been talking about a full-blown invasion there would have even more disastrous consequences. The UN Office for Humanitarian Affairs, OSHA, said on yesterday, that 1 in 10 of children in Gaza under the age of 5 are now acutely malnourished. OSHA said that more than half of the aid missions in the north of Gaza have been denied access this last month, that there has been increasing interference from Israeli forces on how and where aid is delivered. There are about 300 people that are living in North Gaza, and that area has been almost completely cut off from assistance. So the situation is the most severe in North Gaza, and there's a growing risk of famine. UNRWA, the UN Refugee Agency, announced that a food shipment that would have served the needs of 1.1 million people is stuck at a port because of restrictions from the Israeli authorities. That was just announced today. Due to recent restrictions, UNRWA has announced that 25% of families in Gaza are facing catastrophic hunger. And I think it's really important. Let's make no mistake about it. The intentions of the Israeli government has always been clear. Since the attacks of October 7th, they initially said, and I heard this when I was on the ground in Israel just a few weeks ago, the intention has always been cut off food, water, and life-needed services until all of the hostages return home and Hamas has been eradicated. And we're seeing those tactics continue to be applied. So the idea that there are still limits to food and humanitarian assistance should not be surprising to us. And we've been hearing from the U.S. government that it's been a battle to get any humanitarian assistance into Gaza, which is just unacceptable. In North Gaza, the Red Crescent Society reported that Israeli forces killed 2 ambulance drivers over the last day. And I just wanted to share a story. This has been broadcast over international news. And I'm not telling this story to manipulate. It's a story that I just want to humanize the Palestinian people, and particularly the people of Gaza and the children of Gaza. This is a story about a little girl named Hind. My understanding was she was 6 years old. Many people around the world have followed her story the last few weeks. BBC reported it. I know a number of other international news outlets have told her story. She was last heard on the phone with aid workers about 12 days ago. And there's a recording where she was reported to have said, "I'm so scared, please come." And those were said to have been her last words. So 6-year-old Hind Rajab was on a phone call with rescuers. Her family's car came under fire. She was in North Gaza in Gaza City. And her family was trapped in a vehicle, and all of her family was killed. And so she was on the phone with aid workers. The aid workers were on the phone with her for 3 hours. So she had this phone call with the Red Crescent Society. She asked them to save her. They ended up losing touch. And the aid agency sent an ambulance dispatch. And my understanding and the reports that I've read was that they got reports that it was going to be safe. You know, there were Israeli forces in the area, but that they'd gotten reports that it would be safe to go and get her. And so it says aid agencies lost contact with the ambulance that was dispatched to her aid on the 29th of January and its crew. And since then, Hind had been remained missing. For 12 days, the world waited to hear about her fate and also the fate of the aid workers that were rescued, that were sent to rescue her. Pictures of her that have been in the news show this little girl in a purple dress. You know, it had stripes on the top and a tulle skirt, and she had this multi-colored headband with little flowers on it, and you know, this dark curly hair. She had this shy smile on her face and this toy necklace that was pink, and she just looked like this beautiful little girl, a child like any other child. And she just happened to have the misfortune of being a Palestinian from Gaza. And today, Saturday, after 12 days, it was reported from her family that she was found dead inside the car in the area of Gaza City, where the rest of her family had been killed. Family was able to get to her this morning because the Israeli forces had finally withdrawn from that area. And Hind and her whole family were found dead. And the Palestinian Red Crescent Society reported that the ambulance workers who also were sent to her rescue were just meters away. And the 2 paramedics that I began the story had also been killed. And I wanted to tell this story because this is a glimpse of what it's like in Gaza. And when we talk about the death of 10,000, 11,000 or more children, and when the death total is 27, 28, you know, approaching 30,000 people, these are the stories of what we're talking about. It's not just a number. Stories like this is why we have to oppose the ongoing invasion of an army into a population that has been displaced. And, you know, the Israeli army is talking about going into South Gaza, into Rafah. The US is opposing it. The world is opposing it. And Israel has said now that Palestinians in Rafah are going to be moved before the invasion continues, and there's no place for them to be moved to unless they are completely displaced, which is a further ethnic cleansing. So might this motivate us in our work of calling for a ceasefire? Your work matters, and our efforts and our prayers, they make a difference, even if we don't see it. Our holding on to hope, our carrying the stories and the memories of Hind and of every life lost, they make a difference. Please, please, please believe that you can make a difference. You know, put a sign in your front yard that says you support a comprehensive ceasefire, that you advocate for peace for Gaza, peace for Israel, ceasefire now. You know, I'll even talk to our staff. We haven't done this, but we can create a graphic, you know, that can be printed out and put in your window. Write an op-ed for your local paper. Share your heart. Pray for peace, work towards peace, call for a ceasefire, call your members of Congress, call the White House, write letters. Let us continue to press forward in peace, in nonviolence, combating anti-Semitism, combating Islamophobia. Let us work towards a ceasefire together. And I want to close. These are words that came to me last night from a dear friend in Gaza. And he wrote this: "The days after the atrocities end, what's next? Walking through the streets of Rafah and Deir al-Balah, the two towns in Gaza that have not yet been invaded by the Israeli army, they host over 90% population. One can easily observe people walking in the middle of the streets, tents set up on sidewalks, young individuals carrying knives, street fights over trivial matters, skyrocketing prices, assaults on public facilities, groups of teenagers blocking aid trucks with intentions of looting. In essence, the rule of law in Gaza has all but vanished. Consider this scenario before the end of the attacks. What will the aftermath look like? Israel and the US are discussing the termination of the current governance in Gaza. However, they disagree on who will assume control after the cessation of Israel's military actions. The US views the Palestinian Authority as a potential legitimate entity to manage Gaza, whereas the Israeli government has a divided approach. Some advocates for extreme measures like dirty bombs, while others suggest transferring Palestinians out of Gaza and encouraging other countries to accept Gazans as immigrants. There's also a faction within Israel that hope for a collaborative Palestinian leadership under Israeli colonial power, despite historical precedents indicating such an approach's failure. Considering this broad context, and as a Gaza resident who chooses to live here, hoping for Gaza's integration into the democratic free world, I am deeply pessimistic about the future. I believe combating corruption should precede the struggle against occupation. I fear Gaza may descend into chaos without a strong governing authority, which no party desires, given the potential ramifications for the neighboring countries and beyond. On a personal level, I constantly reflect and question myself about the choices I've made, wondering if I was mistaken in believing that I could lead a dignified life in a place that others may not perceive as advanced and sophisticated, yet still consider my home with immense potential. My greatest fear for tomorrow, causing me considerable anxiety, is lack of alternative options and the possibility of being compelled to endure utter chaos under the domination of unruly groups. Sadly, these seem to be the best solutions that the international community has to offer the people of Gaza.